welcome back to another episode of the Amateur Hour podcast. My name's Jacob. Roman is joining me today.
How y'all doing?
And it is Crisis Club Monday, the weekly segment where we go over which teams in World Sport are in biggest crisis mode for the week. And it should come to no surprise that the first team on the list for this week is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
It's about time.
They were Stanley Cup contenders to start the year. Some had them as favorites. I had them going very deep in the playoffs, as did some other people. But they have lost 5 games in a row. They see themselves sitting 5th in the Atlantic Division. There were some ugly losses in that little streak. They lost to the Blackhawks, who are not a good team by any means, and they have just come off a 6-1 drubbing against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Rather embarrassing after losing 4 in a row to lose 6-1 to the Penguins. But like I said, 5th in the Atlantic. They've played more games than anybody else in the division. The Tampa Bay Lightning are behind them by 2 points. However, they have 5 games in hand. So looking at it, you could say the Leafs are in 6th place in the division because Tampa's going to pass them if they make up those games. They're 2 games back in terms of game played of every team above them in the Atlantic Division. The Bruins lead it with 29 points. The Leafs are on 22. It's looking really, really ugly right now. The record is 9-9-4. So, it was 9-4-4 until this little streak started. Lord. They play the Golden Knights tomorrow, the Coyotes on Thursday, and the Avalanche on Saturday to get back in the groove. But the way this team is playing right now, it doesn't look like they're going to be in the playoffs come the end of the season unless something changes. And that's something that needs to change is Mike Babcock. I thought he should have gotten fired after losing in the first round of the playoffs again last year.
As did a lot of people.
It makes it 3 years in a row that they've lost in the first round. And I get that 2 of those were against Boston. The first one I'm not going to discredit him for because that was an up-and-coming team playing the Washington Capitals, who were a very good team, and I'm not gonna fault them for that playoff loss. That was a respectable 6-game loss in the first round. The next year against Boston, again, I'm not gonna be overly critical because in a Game 7 situation against a team as talented as Boston, it's gonna happen, right? You might lose, you might win. But last year, I am not gonna give them the pass because they were up 3-2 playing Game 6 at home. They played awful. They were awful in Game 6 and they lost, and they weren't very good in Game 7 and lost as well. And the biggest problem with Mike Babcock is how stubborn he is. He's a bit like Bill Belichick in terms of his stubbornness, because if his way isn't working, his way of doing things, his way of executing a game plan isn't working, he won't tinker the game plan in order to fix results. He will keep bashing in the same philosophy and the same game plan in hopes that it works, so that you can look at him as the answer because his philosophy is the thing that works. But he has an absolute refusal and stubbornness to change that game plan in order to find better performances. And that is the biggest fault. He has his favorites. He underutilizes his superstars in big situations. Like I can attribute Austin Matthews playing like 7 minutes in the third period of Game 7 last year against Boston. I can attribute Patrick Marleau playing on the power play, the first power play line throughout the playoffs, even though he had no primary power play point from February onward in the NHL season, yet he still continued to give him too many minutes, and it's finally really catching up to him in the regular season. 5 games in a row with a loss. He's got to steady the ship this week or he's gone. I think he should be gone already. Anybody saying Kyle Dubas is the problem, you're an idiot. Kyle Dubas is not the problem for setting up a Stanley Cup contending team. This team is phenomenal, and it just does not have the coach to be able to execute and get the best out of his players. That is why the Toronto Maple Leafs are in absolute crisis mode. Roman.
It makes total sense.
Who is your crisis club of the week?
Well, of course, I'm going to stick in the NFL, but we're going to go to the Detroit Lions.
Yes.
Now, Detroit did not have a terrible start to the season. They started off with 2 wins and a tie.
They were respectable.
Yeah, and one of those wins were against the Eagles in Week 3. But then, since that, they have gone on a 7-game streak of 1 win, 6 losses.
Wow.
And that win came against the Giants.
Don't talk about the Giants.
I know, I'm sorry. It's not looking good for Detroit at all. And to add more salt into that wound, their starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford, is now out, which is an interesting one because the doctors have come out saying that it's going to be 6 weeks or longer because it's a fracture in his back.
Yeah, that's not good.
But he wants to come back. Detroit is listing him as week to week. But what I'm thinking is if I'm Detroit, what's the point of playing him anymore?
Exactly what I was about to say. Shut this guy down. Your team's not going to make the playoffs.
You're in the fourth of one of the hardest divisions right now.
Yeah, you're in arguably the toughest division in the NFC North with the Bears, the Vikings, and the Packers. The Vikings and Packers already have 8 wins. You only have 3. Like,
you're not moving.
Shut it down, buddy.
Yeah, it's basically going to be the Seahawks or the Vikings in that wild card spot. No one else is probably going to come close.
No.
And the Lions just there's no point to play him anymore. And to add even more salt into the wound, their running back, who was a rookie, having a good season. And let me find his name. K'Ron Johnson, 92 attempts, 308 yards. Mm-hmm. Not bad. Mm-hmm. They put him on the IR because of his knee. So does that not just look like they're possibly tanking even more? They're giving up?
It looks like it. I mean, it's a lower record in the league. It's not like bottom tier, but that's not great.
There's just no point there. I think there's 6 weeks left now. There's no point.
You might have to just kind of cave in on this one.
Exactly.
You played 11 games. You got 5 to go. Oh no, you played 10 games. Yeah, so 6 to go.
6 to go.
So honestly, not a bad idea to shut down Matthew Stafford. I think for the New York Giants, you could argue they need to shut down like guys like Saquon because they're not in contention. Yeah. By the way, I just want to touch on the Giants. The reason they're not a crisis club, and they could have been because of like horrible losses consecutively, and to the Jets, they screwed us in our parlay. But what I will say about the Giants is they weren't supposed to be good, and at least there's a glimmer of hope involved in that franchise. You watch Daniel Jones, and even though he has butter on his hands and he can't hold on to the football, he's very good at throwing the football. He's putting up some good numbers, especially for a rookie. He's putting up some good numbers. And there's promise in that organization. But organizations like this, there's really no promise going forward. But Giants, I mean, not a healthy Saquon. The defense is awful, which makes Jones look a little bit worse.
You're missing a few defensive pieces too, aren't you?
But the Giants?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's injury galore. Evan Ingram as well is injured.
Exactly.
Sterling Shepard's injured. And yet still, damn, that's why, a little too much for the Giants, but that's why they have not been a crisis club, and I don't see them being one for a while.
In Detroit's last game, when they played the Cowboys, they lost 35-27. They let Dak throw for 444 yards.
Man, Dak is
he's good, don't get me wrong.
There's going to be a full episode on Dak in the future because I think he's bang average, man.
Yeah.
He's got one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best. He's got one of the best wide receivers in the league, and he's got one of the best.
He's got 2,
if not the best. Exactly.
He's got 2 elite wide receivers,
and he's got arguably the best O-line in the league. Yeah, he doesn't need to be good to be successful, but but that's it.
Enough on Dak.
Yeah, I'm going off.
Go to the Lions against the Cowboys again. Their new quarterbacks. The backup is Jeff Driscoll. Threw for 209 yards, 2 TDs. My bad there. Not terrible, not good. But the funny thing I find is their main person that was rushing the ball is Bo Scarborough. Do you know where Bo Scarborough was 2 weeks ago? Or a couple weeks ago, sorry?
Ooh, I'd really like to know.
He was not in the league.
Wow.
They picked him up and put him on the practice squad and told him he was playing on Saturday.
Wow. Hey, get your chance.
Still, like 14 carries, 55 yards, and a TD.
Yeah.
Not terrible.
No.
And they got Danny Amendola and Marvin Jones in the receiving core, which is not bad. If I'm Detroit and what it looks like, I think they're just gonna tank the season away. What's the point of even trying?
I don't think they should rush back Stafford. I think.
So he wants to come back, though. He's come out saying he wants to come. Look, they want to rest him.
You gotta look at him and go, man, 6 weeks.
It's also a fracture in your back. What's the point of coming back and risking?
It's a bad injury. Don't aggravate it. Just sit out and let us. We're gonna get a good draft pick. We'll run it back next year.
They should get a half decent draft pick actually. Yeah. Where they're standing right now.
It's a pretty good draft class too.
It is.
Yeah, you got a lot of options. But we'll move on. Last team, I'll go for a second one here. The Portland Trailblazers. Woo-hoo! I could have gone for the Spurs. I could have gone for the Pistons. But I'm going to go for the Trailblazers because they have the most riding on them this season because I actually attribute them to be a possible contender where I don't for Detroit or the Spurs. That's why I'm going to use them for the Crisis Club. They started the season 3-2. Since then, they have gone 2-6. So 2 wins in the last 8 games, which included an ugly loss to the Golden State Warriors. And we know how bad the Golden State Warriors have been this year, but
they're running.
But
green
losing 127 to 118 to the Warriors. That was a couple weeks ago, but
still,
it was in that run, and I feel like taking note of it. But they just beat the Spurs. I will say that. However, they lost to the Raptors, lost to the Kings, and they beat the Hawks, lost to the Nets, lost to the Clippers, lost to the Warriors, lost to the 76ers, and that is what it makes up that 8-game slide they're on basically. Even though they're 10th in opponent field goal percentage at about 44, they're 20th in opposition field goal attempts at 91. So what they're doing is, I think they're allowing too many shots. I think defense is a bit of the problem. They put up decent offensive numbers. When you got players like Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum putting up over 20 points. Damian Lillard's almost putting up 30 points per game. Damian Lillard has a case to be the best point guard in the NBA. Because he was the best point guard in the NBA last year, I think. He's going to probably be thereabouts this year because, he's putting up very impressive numbers. 30 points per game, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. McCollum's doing his thing. Rodney Hood is playing pretty good.
Rodney Hood is playing well.
Hassan Whiteside's been fine with 15 points, 12 rebounds per game on 15 points. There's definitely some talent involved. And I can even touch on Anthony Simmons, who's putting up 11.4 points per game. He's coming into his own. He's a really young player, 20 years old. But what is going on with the team is it's more so the defensive aspect, because there's a ton of guys on the team who, even though there's a lot of good players like I listed, there's some really bad players who don't offer a ton on offense compared to defense. Like looking at the offensive rating versus the defensive ratings, you got guys like Damian Lillard absolutely balling, but CJ McCollum offensive rating per 100 possessions is 99, whereas his defensive rating is 113.
Ooh.
So the offensive defensive rating is the estimate of the points produced by the player or scored by the team per 100 possessions compared to the person that they're guarding and the other team based on their time per 100 possessions. So looking at CJ McCollum, that's a pretty ugly stat line. You got guys like...
just to touch on, do you think Melo is going to help at all?
Melo?
Carmelo. Do you think Carmelo is going to help at all?
You know what? There isn't a big problem playing Carmelo.
No.
Carmelo is, he's kind of like Kaepernick, where any team in the NBA could have used Carmelo Anthony because, he can be easily be your 7, 8, or 9th guy in your rotation. And for some reason he wasn't on a team because, there's some bit of you can call it stigma around him just because just a bit because his attitude, people think he's a ball hog, which he was, and people think that he's more concerned about his own stats than being a team player. But he's a little misunderstood in the sense that when he was a free agent all summer, a lot of people don't think he's able to process or be able to handle a lesser role that's not a starting role, such as people attribute his Houston time. He played 10 games in Houston, I believe. He put up 13 points per game, 5.4 rebounds. It's not that bad. He shot 40% from the field, 33% from 3. These are respectable numbers. However, when he signed for Houston, he was told he was going to be a starter. So when he wasn't a starter when he went there was some personal issues because he was like, well, you guys told me to be a starter. But in actuality, if you told Carmelo Anthony his role and he understood that role, there wouldn't be a problem. So if you tell him before, if Portland told him that, you're going to be the 7th, 8th, 9th guy, whatever, he's going to be fine with it. He's going to understand his role, and I think he's going to be able to play, respectable numbers. This is definitely not going to hit. This can only improve Portland. I can't see Melo putting up crazy numbers, but, this is not going to make them worse. By no means is this going to make them worse. Maybe, for defense, like I said, he's not going to be that much of a help, but, adding a player like this isn't going to make you worse. And going back to the offensive defensive ratings, guys like Herzonia, 93 offensive rating, 108 defensive rating. this guy Anthony Tolliver, 84 offensive rating, 111 defensive rating. So just it's a bit of a trend you see. Even Nas Little, 83 offensive rating, 110 defensive rating. I get that he's a rookie, but
I want to touch on him after you're done.
But I get he's a rookie, but again, these are worrisome stats because there's a lot of high tier talent on this team, and I know Yusuf Nurkic is injured, but they should be doing better. I have this team finishing, without the Warriors, probably 6th in the West.
They're gonna pick it up,
So,
they will eventually.
I mean, I hope so.
I'll be surprised if they don't.
I mean, and I think maybe Melo might help them out. Like, you could argue Melo has a potential starting role in this team.
Yeah.
I mean, Rodney Hood he's been
playing
pretty well. So, I mean, maybe if you want to run Carmelo at the 4, which he did at OKC when Paul George played the 3, you could run Melo at the 4. But if anything, he's a great guy off your bench. I think he can put up around 10 points per game, maybe 4 rebounds, less than 1 assist. He's not been a passer, but 10 points, 4 rebounds. You can't tell me this guy isn't going to help your team.
The one thing that I find frightening about Portland is their draft pick in Nasir Little. Picked at number 25 in a heavy draft class this year. He's not looking like he's going to pan out to be anything. A lot of people have picked him to be their bust. He's a very interesting player. Coming out of high school, this guy was a very high possible draft pick, and then he fell in behind Cam Johnson and Kobe White at North Carolina. They were giving him minutes, but they weren't giving him anything.
There was another guy that North Carolina was using. I forget his name. That bigger guy, the bigger forward that they had. I don't know. You could go on. Let me find it.
My whole thing about just that is a poor draft pick, and I don't think he is gonna bring them anything that can help them down the road. We've been talking about, like, I remember a couple episodes we talked about that Portland having that problem of, are they good enough to win a champion? They're there, but they're not there. Nasir Little can't do anything for them.
Yeah, we talked about them in that episode on resetting your roster. Like we did. I mean, it was kind of late. I labeled it mostly as the Jazz, but I mean, the initial question was talking about Portland, and if Portland should decide they want to. I mean, especially after the way they're playing right now, and I mean, yeah, I like the thing with Nasir Little is, I mean, that one isn't. The Anthony Simmons pick is looking okay, but
yes,
but the Nasir Little one isn't looking tremendous right now.
Especially with a few people that slipped through the draft.
Yeah,
especially in Carson Edwards.
Yeah, I will never. I mean,
they don't need him. They don't need him.
Carson Edwards hasn't been crazy, but I feel like that was the biggest sleeper in the.
Are you thinking of Luke May? Sorry, I'm just thinking of North
Carolina. Yeah.
That's
him. That's him.
Yeah. So, a 5-year player.
Yeah,
yes.
That's the guy. Exactly. I was trying to find it. I forgot his name. But
so did I.
Like, again, 3 primary scoring options.
Yes.
That aren't.
But when they brought him in, he was supposed to be number 1.
Yeah.
He came in. I can't remember what the number he came into North Carolina, but it was like a top 5 ranking.
But I mean, Cam Johnson went a little high in the draft, but still they were
another draft pick no one understands, but yeah, it's working out right now, isn't it? On Phoenix.
Is it? I don't know. I actually have no idea how Cam Johnson is playing.
I haven't heard anything bad. I haven't heard anything good.
I think he's just been some minutes he's getting, but here let me try to find the stats. Kobe White's been good though.
Yeah,
that was a good pick.
He's averaging 8 points a game on about 16 minutes.
Cam Johnson?
Yeah.
That's respectable.
He's
on the Suns, yeah. So Suns playing pretty well this year. But I mean, yeah. Again, Portland, keep it to them. But crisis mode. You think they'll recover?
They should.
I mean, it's a loaded conference, but I mean, again, it's early. They should be able to come back. In terms of upcoming games.
Do you still have them making the playoffs?
It's tough to not put them in the playoffs.
With other teams playing well that we didn't think, like Dallas.
Well, I always had Dallas as my sleeper
the dark horse
pick. But making playoffs, I think they still will make the playoffs. I think there's too much talent in that team. I guess I'm not completely sure on the timetable of Yusuf Nurkic recovery, but they're playing the Rockets today. That'll be a tough game, but they got the Pelicans.
I wonder if Melo's playing tonight.
Probably can play the Pelicans. Probably gonna be able to beat the Pelicans.
You hope.
Then they're playing the Bucks. You're gonna lose that. Then they're playing the Cavs. Then they're playing the Bulls. Then they're playing the Thunder. Then they're playing the Bulls again. So
it's a favorable schedule.
I mean, 4 of those 6 are winnable games.
Yeah.
So I can see them being able to. Oh, I listed 7 games. So 5 of those 7 games I can see being wins. So I think that will put them back on track. I think they'll win 4 of those 7 games. Just kind of give them one off game. But I think they will find themselves back on track. Maybe they can even surprise Houston. 5 losses in a row can not 5 losses. They're not the ones with 5 losses in a row. But in a bad string of form, they just beat the Spurs. Maybe they can come up and beat the Rockets. Maybe if Melo plays, he can start balling. But we'll leave it at that for this episode. Thank you for listening to the MHR Podcast, Crisis Club Monday. Come back soon for more daily content. We haven't missed a day since September 20th. I looked it up. So every day since September 21st, there has been at least one post.
They're flying out.
And we are continuing to do that even under the hectic exam and midterm schedules that we've been succumbed to. But come back soon for more daily content.